Welcome to the deep dive. We are opening up the archives, taking a stack of sources, and really distilling the history you need.
That's right.
Today, we are setting the stage for, well, one of the most transformative conflicts in North American history, often misunderstood too, the Texas Revolution.
Absolutely. And this isn't just, the big battles and the heroes on horseback people might think of first. It's really a deep dive into why a political and cultural bargain just fell apart.
Right.
Before any shots were fired, you really need to grasp the conditions, precarious, violent, desperate conditions that pushed these settlers to challenge a whole nation.
Exactly. So our mission today, it's foundational. We need to unpack those deep historical roots, the clash of legal systems that just couldn't mesh.
Yeah, fundamentally incompatible.
The economic drivers, the political betrayals, all the things that turned folks looking for land into, well, revolutionaries. By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand why war wasn't just likely. It was pretty much baked in from the start.
To really get it, we need to go back. Early 1800s. Picture Texas. It's vast, it's beautiful, sure, but it's also incredibly harsh, sparsely settled.
A contested frontier is how the sources put it.
Exactly. Spain and then Mexico after independence, they claimed it on their maps. But the real power on the ground, that was the Native American tribes, especially the Comanche. Fornable doesn't even begin to cover it.
Yeah, the sources really hammer that home. The Spanish, later the Mexicans, they just struggled to control this place. It wasn't some neat line on a map.
No, it was buffer zone, constantly under attack.
And the evidence for that fighting is just raw.
It is. The Comanche were masters of raiding. They controlled trade. They controlled violence across huge areas. And what's fascinating, historically, is how quickly you see evidence of their contact with the Spanish.
Yeah.
They had horses. Critically, they had firearms.
So this wasn't some isolated conflict out on the edge of nowhere.
Not at all. It was dynamic. And the landscape itself told the story. You read descriptions, of bones bleaching and seeming to point to coming strife, just left out there from the constant conflict. Unrelenting cruelty is a phrase that comes up.
Grim stuff.
So Mexico, the new nation, inherits this frontier. It's hostile, it's dangerous, and it's practically empty of people loyal to them.
Which leads them to make a deal. Out of necessity, maybe desperation.
I think desperation is the right word. A pragmatic deal, sure, but ultimately flawed. Struck in the 1820s, this is our theme today, the broken bargain. Mexico needed a shield, desperately. Anglo-Americans wanted land, cheap and plentiful. Opportunity.
Okay, so the core exchange, it looks simple on the surface.
On the surface, yeah. Land and security.
And in return?
Loyalty, Mexican citizenship, and, fitting in culturally. Assimilation was the goal.
But you mentioned the fatal flaw right at the start.
Yes. These promises, they were built on a foundation of systems that just didn't match. Legal systems, religion, political ideas. Totally different worlds.
And that foundation, well, it just wasn't strong enough, was it?
Not even close. It couldn't handle the pressure of all those people arriving, leading straight to a clash that went way beyond just complaining. It became war. But first, let's rewind even further. Why was Mexico in this position? What was Texas before the Anglos arrived in big numbers?
Okay, historically, Texas was part of New Spain. Vast territory. But, and this is key, it was never really a core part of the Spanish Empire.
More like a buffer zone.
Precisely. A strategic buffer. Its main importance was defense against foreigners trying to sneak in.
And the big fear for Spain, initially anyway, wasn't the U.S., it was France, right?
Exactly. The sources bring up La Salle's expedition in 1685. Ill-fated is putting it mildly.
Yeah, ended badly for him.
Very badly. Shot in the head by one of his own men, a fellow named de Haut, apparently buried right there by the priest, Father Anastasia. Grim, like you said.
So that French threat, even if it faded, it made Spain really paranoid about that northern border. Obsessively paranoid. And their usual method for trying to control these frontiers was the mission system. That's where we get places like San Antonio de Valero.
Which later becomes the Alamo.
The very same. And San Jose Mission. Famous landmarks.
But what were they actually trying to do with these missions? They weren't just churches, were they?
Oh no, far more ambitious. It was civilizing, religious, and military. The sources are quite blunt about the goal. Convert savages into men, and then labor for their conversion to Christianity.
So turn nomadic people into settled, Spanish-speaking, tax-paying subjects.
That was the plan. Loyal citizens who would farm, occupy the land, and defend it for the crown.
But it just didn't work,
Yeah.
especially not in Texas. Why did it fail so badly there?
Well, a few reasons. Fundamentally, it clashed with the native cultures they were trying to change. Plus, the environment was harsh, and resources from Spain were inconsistent. The sources talk about Indians rebelling violently against the rigorous military and religious discipline.
They don't want to be forced into that life.
No. And then you had things like drought. An expedition in 1693 found crops destroyed, the local people hostile. They just abandoned the effort. By 1694, Texas was basically empty of Europeans again. It's remarkable.
So Spain claims this huge area, fails to settle it with their own people, pulls back and leaves it empty and dangerous.
Pretty much sums it up. And because it was empty and dangerous, the only non-natives really making inroads were, ironically, American adventurers, filibusters, outlaws sometimes.
Which just fueled the Spanish paranoia about the U.S. even more.
Dramatically amplified it. And later, Mexico inherited that same suspicion.
This brings us to those filibusters. Unauthorized military types, right? This is where you see Americans showing interest beyond just trading.
Yes, the term filibuster is crucial. They operated outside U.S. law, but sometimes, with a wink and a nod from people back in the States. Philip Nolan is a classic example.
Late 1790s, came in saying he was after horses.
That was the cover story. Mexican authorities figured, probably correctly, that he was really mapping the territory, scouting it out for the U.S.
And it didn't end peacefully for him?
No. 1801, he gets killed by a cannonball. His men fought hard but had to surrender. This wasn't just some random shootout. It set a pattern. Deep Mexican distrust of American motives. They saw Americans as inherently expansionist, ready to grab land.
And Nolan wasn't the only one. There were other attempts, right? Like McGee's project, trying to set up an independent republic.
In the 1810s, yes. Openly trying to carve out a piece of Mexico. So you see the picture. Mexico gains independence, inherits this massive, unstable, hostile frontier. Comanche raids are relentless, and they know Americans have tried to take it before.
Given all that, why on earth did they think inviting more Americans was the answer?
I don't think they thought it was a good idea. They thought it was the only idea left. They were unstable, they were broke, they needed a fix, fast and cheap, and that leads straight to the empresario system.
Okay, let's unpack that desperation. It's the 1820s, Mexico is newly independent, things are chaotic. Why couldn't they just send their own army or settlers?
Resources, basically. The new government was shaky, dealing with internal fights. They just didn't have the money, the manpower, the logistics to police 1,000 miles of hostile border. The treasury was bare.
And the threat wasn't minor. We're talking about the Comanche, right? Actively pushing out the few existing Mexican settlements.
Absolutely. It was serious depopulation.
Yeah.
The few loyal folks already there were actually moving south, deeper into Mexico for safety.
So the colonization plan had two jobs.
Two vital jobs, yeah. First, settle the land legally, put Mexican citizens on it officially. Second, create a buffer, a populated shield. Basically, get people there who could defend themselves, and by doing that, defend Mexico's northern flank from the Comanche and others.
Enter Stephen F. Austin, 1821. He picks up his father's colonization grant. He's really the key figure here, isn't he?
He's the essential figure for Anglo-Texas, yes. And his initial deal was, well, unique. It shows just how desperate Mexico was at that moment.
How unique. Better terms than later, guys.
Way better. The sources are very clear. His first grant had no specific territory limit, no deadline for bringing in the first 300 families. Nobody else got terms like that later on. Subsequent contracts were much stricter. Timelines, boundaries, everything.
And his powers. That seems like the really risky part for Mexico looking back.
It was an incredible gamble. He was given, temporarily, all powers necessary for the civil and military government of his colony. Think about that.
A foreign land agent is basically the governor, judge, jury, and military commander.
For a time, yes. Until Mexico could set up its own regular administration. A huge amount of power and trust placed in a foreigner. An American, no less the very people they distrusted.
Why not put a Mexican military guy in charge?
Couldn't afford it, couldn't spare one, maybe both. They needed a solution that paid for itself. Austin provided that. He funded the colony's basic setup using fees from the settlers. Mexico got defense on the cheap. Settlers got massive amounts of land.
Okay, let's nail down the terms of that bargain. What did a settler actually get?
Land. Lots of it. A single man got a section, 640 acres. A family got a league that's over 4,400 acres. Basically free compared to the U.S.
Huge incentive. And what did they promise in return? Three things.
Three core things, yeah. Designed to make them loyal Mexicans. First, become Mexican citizens, swear allegiance. Second, obey Mexican law. That's the civil law system, remember?
Yeah.
Big source of friction later.
And the third one, religion.
Yep. Convert to Catholicism. Mexico didn't have separation of church and state like the U.S. Catholicism was the official required religion.
How did all the Protestant settlers deal with that? Because most were Protestant, right?
Overwhelmingly, they
Mhm.
mostly treated it as a formality, got baptized, paid lip service. Mexico often didn't have the priests or the manpower out on the frontier to check too closely.
So they kind of look the other way.
To some extent, yes,
Yeah.
but it created this undercurrent of distrust. Mexican officials saw it as evasion, a lack of real commitment to becoming Mexican.
And Austin wasn't the only impresario. There were others, right? DeWitt, some Irish guys.
That's right. Green DeWitt founded Gonzales in 1825. James Power, James Hewitton, Irish impresarios down at Refugio. The system worked in terms of getting people there, maybe too well.
Yeah, it seems Mexico filled the void, but didn't quite realize they were importing a whole different culture, one that wouldn't easily bend to their rules.
Exactly. The seeds of conflict were sown right there the moment those first settlers arrived, bringing their own ideas about law, religion, and government.
So that friction, it wasn't just likely, it was pretty much guaranteed from the start. You're mashing together two very different ways of life.
Right next to each other, and putting this largely self-governing foreign community right on your most insecure border, it was asking for trouble.
And the clashes started almost right away. Language, religion.
Yeah, those created distance. Most Anglos didn't learn Spanish. Mexican officials often didn't speak English. Religion, we mentioned the required Catholicism versus their Protestant background. Huge cultural gap. Communication basically had to go through Austin or the other impresarios.
But the big one, the one that really caused day-to-day problems, was the legal system difference. American common law versus Mexican civil law.
Absolutely critical. You have to understand this to get the Texian mindset. It wasn't just a minor difference. It felt fundamental to them.
Okay, break that down. Common law, what were they used to?
They were used to a system based on precedent, court decisions, local juries, relatively quick resolutions, especially for things like land titles or local disputes. Familiar, accessible.
And Mexican civil law, how is that different in practice for a settler?
It was based on written codes, statutes, often administered by appointed officials, not local juries. And it could be slow, really slow, bureaucratic. If you had a land dispute or needed a contract registered, it might involve multiple steps, translations, trip to distant government centers, like Saltillo, the state capital way off in Coahuila.
So you've moved your family, risked everything, built a cabin, cleared land, but getting that official title deed could take years. Stuck in paperwork.
Exactly. That breeds anxiety, insecurity,
Yeah.
and deep frustration. It starts to feel less like bureaucratic delay and more like, well, oppression. Like the system is designed to work against you. This legal stuff really poisoned the well early on.
And that distrust boils over with the first real challenge to Mexican authority, the Fredonian Rebellion, 1826-1827. Small, but significant.
Very significant as a warning sign. This was Hayden Edwards in Nacogdoches. He tried to force everyone, Tejanos and Anglos alike, to show him their land titles or lose their land, basically acting like he was the government.
Which he wasn't, and Mexican authorities saw it as a direct challenge.
Rightly so.
Oh.
Edwards and his group even declared an independent Republic of Fredonia. Didn't last long.
It fizzled out.
Pretty quickly, yeah. Interestingly, Stephen F. Austin actually helped the Mexican government put it down. Shows not all Anglos were ready to resold yet, but Mexico City, they focused on the rebellion part. It confirmed their fears about Americans trying to break away.
So, Mexico sees Fredonia, they see the flood of immigrants continuing, and they see the U.S. government repeatedly trying to buy Texas, 1825, 1827, 1829.
Yeah, the U.S. wasn't subtle about wanting it.
So Mexico decides they have to slam on the brakes. Hard.
Which leads directly to what the sources call the most ominous step, a real turning point. The Law of April 6, 1830.
This was Mexico trying to regain control. How did it try to shut the door on the Anglos?
It was pretty drastic. Article 11 basically banned further immigration from the United States, period.
Just stopped it.
Tried to.
Yeah.
It also banned bringing in more slaves, which affected the Southerners moving in. It canceled impresario contracts that weren't finished. And maybe the most alarming part for the settlers, it called for building new military garrisons across Texas.
So putting the colonies under military watch. Customs, houses, troops.
Essentially, yes. Taking away that autonomy they'd gotten used to under Austin. They saw it as a total betrayal. Mexico invited them in, asked them to fight Indians, risk everything, and now, just because the U.S. wanted to buy the place, Mexico was closing the border and sending soldiers to boss them around.
You can see why they'd be furious.
Absolutely. And this law directly leads to the first real shooting conflicts in 1832.
Because you need soldiers to enforce these new rules, these tariffs.
Right. And some commandants, like Colonel Bradburn at Anahuac, got heavy-handed. The sources use phrases like arbitrary acts of oppression and tyranny, ignoring local courts, imposing martial law.
And the Texians pushed back.
They did. At Anahuac, they held meetings, passed resolutions condemning Bradburn's actions. Then came the fighting of Velasco.
What happened there?
John Austin, no relation to Stephen, by the way, was trying to move cannons down a river. The Mexican commander at Fort Velasco, Ugarte, refused passage. So Austin's men attacked the fort. And they won, took the fort.
That must have been a huge confidence boost, beating the regular army.
Massive. But here's the critical point we have to keep stressing. Even then, in 1832, they weren't fighting for independence from Mexico.
What were they fighting for then?
They were fighting, in their words, in defense of the Republican principles of the Federal Constitution of Mexico of 1824. They saw themselves as loyal Mexican citizens, fighting against specific illegal acts by military officers, fighting for the Constitution that protected their rights as part of a federal system.
Their loyalty was to that federal structure.
Exactly.
Right.
But that structure and that Constitution they clung to was about to be completely dismantled by one man.
Okay, so the Constitution of 1824, why was this document so vital for the Texians?
It was everything. It was the legal basis for the whole deal, in their eyes, because it set up Mexico as a federal republic, like the U.S. in theory.
Meaning states had rights, power wasn't all in Mexico City.
Exactly. Federalism meant states had significant autonomy. Texas was joined with Coahuila as one state, Coahuila y Tejas. But that statehood, under the 1824 Constitution, gave them considerable self-rule, freedom from direct military interference for the central government. It let them run their own local affairs, more or less. It was their legal shield.
But back in Mexico City, the political winds were shifting towards centralism. And the man leading that charge was General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna.
Ah, Santa Anna, one of history's great opportunists. Complicated figure.
He started out as a hero, didn't he? A Republican.
Briefly, yes. Back in 1823, he helped overthrow the Emperor Iturbide and restore the Republic. He was hailed as a champion of federalism then, but that didn't last. He was ambitious. By 1834, the signs were unmistakable. The sources say daily revelations plainly indicated Santa Anna's determination to destroy the federal system.
He wanted all the power for himself, a dictator.
Essentially, yes. A central military despotism is the phrase used. He wasn't just grabbing power. He was actively working to tear down the whole federal structure that Texians relied on. He dissolved Congress when it suited him, ignored laws, started rewriting everything to concentrate power in Mexico City, and ultimately in himself.
So the 1824 Constitution was becoming meaningless.
Worse than meaningless. He was actively destroying it. And just as this is happening, Stephen F. Austin is stuck in Mexico City.
Right, he went down there in 1833 trying to argue for Texas.
He was carrying petitions from a convention the Texians held, their big ask. Separate Texas from Coahuila. They felt neglected, too far from the state capital in Saltillo, their needs ignored. Austin was trying to make the system work, negotiate a solution.
But he got impatient with the delays and made a mistake.
A huge mistake, according to the sources. An imprudent act. He'd been there months getting nowhere. So he wrote a letter back home, privately, to leaders in Texas. He basically said, look, if Congress keeps stalling on separating us from Coahuila, you guys should just go ahead and start organizing your own state government anyway.
Sort of like, let's just do it ourselves.
Pretty much. Provisional separation, maybe. But that letter, it was intercepted by the government. And that advice, the sources say, sank deep in Santa Anna's heart.
It confirmed all Santa Anna's suspicions about the Anglos wanting to break away.
It gave him the perfect excuse. He had Austin arrested. Thrown in prison in January 1834, charged with sedition, treason.
Just for writing a letter.
That's how Santa Anna used it.
Yeah.
Austin was locked up for a year. Even when they let him out into the city limits later, Santa Anna kept him there. Wouldn't let him go home until, as the sources put it, Santa Anna's own centralist schemes were perfected.
So keeping the main Anglo leader neutralized while he consolidated power.
Exactly. It was political strategy. And Austin's imprisonment sent a chilling message back to Texas. Their main guy, the one who always preached patience and working within the system, was locked up by the very government he was trying to negotiate with.
When Austin finally got back to Texas in 1835, he must have been a changed man.
Completely. He was no longer advocating for patience. He'd seen Santa Anna's dictatorship firsthand. He returned to find Texas already simmering, ready to boil over.
And then came the final blow from Santa Anna.
Late 1835. Word arrives of Santa Anna's decree from October 3rd. It made it official. The federal system was dead, abolished. The Constitution of 1824 was gone, wiped out.
And the government's message was blunt.
Absolute chillingly blunt. Santa Anna's minister, Bonilla, declared that the people of Texas had no rights but such as the nation might confer.
Wow. So rights aren't inherent. They're just gifts the dictator might decide to give you.
That's the message. It stripped away every legal argument the Texians had. They weren't defending constitutional rights anymore because the Constitution didn't exist. Now they were just subjects of a dictator. And then came the final demand, the one that made war unavoidable. From General Corres.
Santa Anna's commander in Texas, right? His brother-in-law.
That's him. Corres issued an order. He demanded that the main Texian leaders, the prominent men who'd been organizing resistance, signing petitions, be arrested and sent to the interior of Mexico for military trial, for chastisement.
Hand over your leaders for punishment, basically.
Essentially, yes. To face military courts controlled by Santa Anna, it wasn't a negotiation, it was an ultimatum. Submit entirely, hand over your leaders to likely execution, or else.
That leaves no room to move, does it?
None. The argument was over. Submission meant disaster. Resistance was the only option left. The bargain was well and truly broken. Irreparably. #tag conclusion.
Okay, let's quickly recap those core forces that pushed Texas over the edge. It was a clear progression, wasn't it?
Definitely. First, that deep, irreconcilable culture clash. Law systems that didn't fit, language barriers, religious differences, constant grinding friction.
Second, the fight for self-government. The Texians clinging to the 1824 Constitution as their guarantee of autonomy. Then Mexico, getting nervous, passes the law of 1830, tries to shut the doors, sends troops breaking the original spirit of the deal.
And third, the final straw, the dictatorial betrayal by Santa Anna. Abolishing the Constitution, throwing Austin in jail, and then that final impossible demand from General Corres to hand over their leaders. That just slammed the door on any peaceful outcome.
The choice became stark. Submit to a dictator or fight.
Black and white. Liberty or death, as they started saying.
And the response wasn't just talk anymore. It became action in Gonzales.
Immediately, General Corres retreated to San Antonio after some early skirmishes, and the Texians, now mobilizing as an army, surrounded him there. They actually stormed the town, Bixar, and forced Corres to surrender in December 1835.
A big early victory for the Texians.
Huge. But it just enraged Santa Anna. He decided he had to crush this rebellion personally. Started marching north with a huge army.
Setting the stage for the Alamo, Goliad. A really bloody phase. To give listeners a sense of that desperation, let's use Travis's words from the Alamo, February 23rd, 1836.
Yeah, that famous letter. He writes, "The enemy in large force is in sight. I shall never surrender or retreat." And then the iconic ending, victory or death.
That really captures the shift, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It wasn't really about independence, not at first. It was about rights under the Mexican Constitution. Santa Anna made that impossible. He turned what was resistance into a fight for sheer survival, for sovereignty.
Makes you think, doesn't it? How quickly a fight over rights, over a constitution, can become a fight for your life when faced with absolute power.
It's a sobering lesson from history. And that's where we'll pick up next time. The actual spark at Gonzales, the come-and-take-it cannon, and the immediate violent consequences that truly ignited the Texas Revolution.
Looking forward to it. Join us then.